Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dungeon Master Solutions. This is GMKC. This is the fifth podcast. Today I have with us my good friend Ian once more. How you doing, Ian?
Hey, doing well. So I won't reveal the topic yet, but here's a hint. My favorite examples of these are Home Alone and Indiana Jones. What are we talking about, Casey?
We're talking about traps, and I'm glad you mentioned it because Indiana Jones is exactly who I thought about, and a great source of good ideas to steal for the budding DM.
So good.
Absolutely. Now, before we get into the nuts and bolts of the traps we like, let me ask you this. Do you, generally speaking, like using traps?
I'll say I like using certain types of traps. Not the ones that are like, oh, gotcha, you're dead. I don't like using those types, but I do like using traps on occasion.
Dude, it's interesting you say that because that's the exact same terminology that I use. The gotcha traps, I feel bad. I mean, I've used them before, but the players are always, afterwards, I feel like a ha-ha, and then everyone's just like, oh, it sucks. We all feel bad.
Yeah, and it actually can really slow down your game because then they think like, oh, this DM's out to get me around any corner. So then they're like, okay, I'm taking out the 10-foot poles. I'm moving at half speed.
It devolves into the first edition where you tap every tile in front of you to make sure there's not some kind of trap there.
Exactly. So I don't like to use those type of traps. But I do like to use, I would say I would call them like puzzle traps,
Okay, cool. Well, in that case, let's get into it, man. What is a trap that you have used on your players?
Oh, okay. So I love this one adventure. I use it a lot. It's called Bastion of the Frost King.
Oh, a great one.
Yeah, and the traps, like in quotes, the traps are more like puzzles, and I really, really like it because all the traps are designed around this one theme. So, you go into a room and you're trying to collect these bells in the dungeon, and each bell has a color and it spells out a poem and everything like that. But they aren't going to just kill the players outright. But if you don't figure it out, things start to get a little more complicated and a little deadlier. Like, for example, there's a study in the one room, and it's like a library. There's a bunch of books, and the bell's at the top of the bookshelf. So, usually the player climbs up, grabs the bell. Well, the bell, since it's red, it's heated to the touch, and you touch it and it burns you, but it also teleports to another bookshelf, and you roll a D4 and 4 books come flying out, and now you're in combat. These books are flying around, and so it's my character went over and grabbed the bell again. It burnt him again and summoned a few more books. And so they're like, oh, crap, we got to stop touching this bell. What's going on? And so that's pretty soon the whole library is surrounded by books flying. And then as the combat goes on, I try to give my players hints oh, you notice one of the books that's flying around is called 100 ways to grab a bell or something like that, or 100 ways to stop flying books or something like that. Or I think it was to summon a bell or something like that. And inevitably they figure it out. They grab the book, they open that book, the bell magically teleports into there, and then they can grab it, and all the books fall to the ground, making a cool end of the combat,
Right.
But I really like it because it fits with the theme of the adventure, it fits with the theme of the dungeon, and it ties into everything else that's going on.
Now,
what about you?
Well, I certainly will answer that. Let me ask you this, though. In that scenario that you described, is there a way for the players to move forward without solving it? Can they just brute force it? Can they just fight enough books?
No.
Okay.
Unless I was okay, they've beaten 50 books now. I'm gonna oh, that was the book that you defeated. Oh, you noticed that the last book that you defeated was the one, and then maybe I would make it work like that.
I see.
Because, well, you know how combat can get if it goes on for longer than 15 rounds or something crazy like that.
Right. You got to work towards, slimming it up. And that's where your advice comes in, where, I personally would probably make my players make a perception check or some kind of saving throw. But yes, absolutely.
Give them some hints like, oh, hey, or, if they haven't got it by the third time they grab this bell, like, oh, you notice, as you grab the bell this time, one of the books like come out of the bookshelf just a little bit. And then it like slips back in. Then at least they'll like be like, okay, something's up with that book. I'm gonna check it out or something.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, yeah, we'd be there for the whole adventure fighting books.
Of course, unlimited XP, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So, to answer your earlier question, there is one that piques my interest. Okay, so I wanted to share it today because I've studied it and I really like it. I haven't been able to bust it out on my players yet, but it is from an ancient adventure. It is from the first edition of Dungeon Magazine, and the adventure is called Into the Fire, where the players have to travel into the mountains, and spoiler alert, they fight a dragon.
Oh, nice.
So it's a high-level adventure. So the dragon that they're fighting is like a mastermind, and he has many magical items, and he has the ability to scry. So coming into this scenario, the players are disadvantaged, and they end up becoming much more so. So I will describe it to you like this. They're trying to go down the tunnel, down into the entrance, trying to get into this dragon's lair. And they come across this sort of wooden floor. And, they could perhaps notice that it is like flimsy or whatnot, but they can easily get over it. And then immediately after passing this sort of wooden flooring, a portcullis drops. And it's at this point that of course the dragon is, pulling the levers behind the scenes, but the portcullis drops and the wood floor falls into open up into a pit. So it happens simultaneously, and you give the players the option. Of course, you can be precise and let them say, oh, I was hanging back. But any of the players who up in the biz, you have to say, do you jump forward in front of the falling portcullis, or you jump back and fall down into the pit? Oh. And so, and inevitably your players are going to be mixed matched. Like perhaps your fighter is going to want to jump in front of the portcullis and be like, I'm ready to fight this dragon. But your squishies are going to want to hang back and, end up in the pit. And regardless of what happens, you've got people down in the pit. You've got people singled out in front of the portcullis alone, and you've got a tunnel that can be filled with dragon fire as the dragon comes roaring down the way, and really putting the players to the test. But
that is good. Plus, it offers like a split-second decision, like which a lot of the times your players can be like in paralysis analysis or whatever, where they're like spend 30 minutes. Okay, I'm going to do this, but it's like, no, it's falling right now. Like, what do you do right now? Jump, it's like, it makes them move forward for sure.
Mm-hmm. And
that's a good one.
Oh yeah. And it feels, which I think is very important with traps. I think it feels fair because the players see it unfolding, and it's not just, oh, hey, get wrecked. It's time to get wrecked. Sorry.
Yes, for sure. Like in my research, I found a bad example of a DM they'd spent like 15 to 20 years with the same characters for this campaign. Mm-hmm. And they come up to a doorway, and the character's like, okay, we walk through, we're going to check out this room. He's like, hand me your character sheets. And they're like, what are you talking about, dude? He's like, you walk through the doorway, hand me your character sheets right now. And they're like, what are you talking about? He's like, you're all dead. And he ripped their sheets in front of them. And they're like, what do you mean? He's like, you should have examined the door. It was the doorway. I'm like, I would never do something like that.
At that point, it's just death by DM fiat.
Right, yeah. So I don't like traps like that.
Right.
Just give them a chance. And like you said, make it fair. So, fair is fun for sure.
Now, the most common type of trap that I use is not actually a stopping point for an adventure. It's just a bump in the road.
Mm-hmm.
And
setback.
Right. And most often I hide needle traps, a la Skyrim, needle traps in doors and in treasure chests and things like that. It's with a simple dexterity saving throw, depending on how their level is. Or oppositely, if they aren't able to understand what the rune is, that it'll explode and then give them perhaps psychic damage, like an intelligence saving throw of some kind.
Yes.
But those are by far the most common types of traps I use, but those big flashy ones like the portcullis pit trap is, that's That's good. That's good DMing right there.
Here's another one that I really liked. So this is when I was first getting into Dungeons & Dragons. They had just come out with a storyline called Tyranny of Dragons. The dragon cultists are up to no good. They're trying to summon Tiamat. And this was a level 1 trap. So you walk in the room. There are cool paintings on the walls of all the chromatic dragons. There's like a white one on a mountain and he's like breathing ice. So it's very evocative. You're like, oh man, okay. It's giving you a sense of the story. But their eyes were missing. Like an eye was missing on each of the dragons. And there was a sarcophagus like in the middle, and it was like almost like a dragon priest from Skyrim. It was like one of those deals. So the coffin comes up and poison gas starts like coming in the room. And he's like, you've got 3 rounds before you all succumb to this. So we're like scrambling. He's like, oh, there's gems in the sarcophagus, red, white, black, green, blue. And so we're like, oh, okay. And then we figured out, okay, we matched all the dragons with their color and everything like that. And then the gas dissipated, the door opened, and we can move into the dungeon. But I really like those ones where it's like a puzzle, but it also fits in with the theme. It's fair. You've got kind of like the time limit, the pressure that you were talking about. Like we got to move quick, no time to like analyze and sit back.
Right. And what you can do with those kinds of traps are that you can put them immediately in initiative order. And so, and if you said you had 3, would you say 3 rounds before the fog comes on or before the poison?
Something like that, yeah.
So you can immediately, and don't tell them anything, initiative starts. And then so on each turn, they can learn a little bit of information here, a little bit of information there. It's like on one turn, there's a perception check to see the painting. On one perception check, it's to examine the sarcophagus, that kind of vibe. And then you could even drag it out and, and especially if the players sort of like are confused, can't move forward. You can, once the poison gas starts filling there, they can start taking that damage, but it's not immediately lethal. And so it stretches the time and puts more, pressure on the clock.
Yeah. Or if you didn't want it all in one room, I've seen it where like you have to go throughout the dungeon collecting like certain items. Like maybe there's like a statue at the end and he's missing a sword, a shield, a helmet. And then as you're exploring the dungeon, you find all the different pieces and then you assemble it at the end. And then, it opens up to the big bad or something like that.
Right.
Or statue comes alive. It's like, oh crap, we just assembled it.
What did we do?
Yeah.
Well, very good, my friend. I think that's all we have for today. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Dungeon Master Solutions. I am GMKC. My guest today was my good friend Ian. Thanks for stopping by, Ian.
Yeah, of course. Good luck with those perception checks, adventurers. Those
Hell yeah. See you next time.
See ya.